My name is Ivan Fisher-Owen, and I'm with Beyond the Bark, an inclusive puppet and animation company comprised of myself and my wife and creative partner, Emma Fisher-Owen. Recently, I had the good fortune to have the opportunity to work with Will Wood to create a music video to accompany his composition, Tomcat Disposables. This was a really exciting project. A lot of work went into it. It's a stop-motion animation that involved taking over 8,000 individual photographs. Aside from some post-processing and digital animation that was applied after the fact, almost all of what is seen in every frame of this animation physically exists. It involved stop-motion silhouette animation that was created using layers of paper and wood. It also involved a lot of laser-cut elements, such as this little mouse, who is the main character, and has things like removable faceplates to change expression, and gears that physically work in reality as they appear to in the animation. What follows is a montage of behind-the-scenes photographs, video clips, time-lapse sequences that give hopefully give a sense of what was involved, start to finish, to create this film. If you'd like to see the entire finished piece, which I hope that you will or already have, you can see a link in the description of this video, or you can see it on Will Wood's official channel. Will was an absolute delight to work with. I'm really happy with the end result, and I'm excited to share this glimpse. I'll provide a little bit of narration to try and explain some of the things that are shown in these photographs. Thank you for taking a look. The earliest draft of the mouse's face for shots where it was being viewed from in front just didn't quite sit right. The face didn't look quite cute enough or lovable enough. Will created this sketch to help make a more adorable face, a more round face with larger features. And then I pulled that into CAD and traced around that illustration and maintained the essence of that illustration to create something that could be produced on a laser cutter and then used as one of the wooden puppets. At the center of the world that this mouse inhabits is what I refer to as the Ames portal. The Ames portal is a rotating Ames window that the mouse uses to phase between different realms within this larger world. For those that haven't run into this before, an Ames window is a particular optical illusion developed by Adelbert Ames Jr., really fascinating scientist who worked in many different areas, including human perception. Even if you haven't run across his work specifically before, you may have seen it. A great example of one of the illusions that he developed was known as the Ames room, which is a room which messes with human perception to make things appear to be different sizes than they actually are. This example is from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where Gene Wilder comes into this hallway, which looks normal, but that as he walks down it, it turns out that the perspective is all wrong. The window itself is actually a trapezoid shape, even though it appears to be a normal rectangular window at an angle. Here is the window before it's been painted. As you'll see, without the paint, it doesn't look quite right. It's actually made out of very thin wood, but the paint causes it to look like it's much thicker and gives it more depth. And the end result is something that looks much thicker than it is in reality. One of the central things that we wanted to communicate in this piece is that the whole world has momentum to it and is driving towards a conclusion. These gears I first designed in a CAD software and made sure that they all worked and meshed correctly. I then cut them out using a laser cutter. Because these gears work as they should, when I move the mechanism slightly, all the gears advance themselves. On the base of this entire mechanism are incremental lines which allow me to move the mechanism by a specific number of degrees each time. I also wanted to achieve certain camera motions that could correspond to the motion of this device. And for that, what I ended up doing was creating a large partial ring that the camera could be mounted to. So at the center of everything is the axle for the Ames window, and then there's a ring that the camera is on, and the center of this ring is the center of the axle. And then the little increments on the ring that the camera is mounted to allow the camera to be moved along this track to rotate around a central point. While the mechanism is quite smooth, for live action video it wouldn't work, but for still images it makes it easy to move it and then take a picture and move it. It also has to be aimed, and that's a bit of a challenge because it's really important that whatever you want to be the focus of the rotation is at the center of the complete circle that this mechanism would be if it were a full circle. And so to aim it, I got two very thin straight rods and taped them to the mechanism pointing towards the center of this imaginary circle, and then lined that up to the center of the axle for the Ames window, or for other objects that this rig was used for. The base of this camera rig was an old portable fold-out workbench with a vise, and I put it on some carpet sliders, and then marked a grid out on the floor of the garage where I was doing this work, so that I could also pan the camera left, right, forward, and backward by specific increments to create other motions to the camera. And all of this culminates in being able to create some interesting movements with the camera during the animation. And here's a loop of the Ames window in action. This is an early motion test that shows some of the interesting visual effects that are achieved when it rotates. And then a pause for coffee. In the background of the shots with the Ames window are these little miniature shadow scenes, and they are lit by a small focusing flashlight in a rig that I designed and built specifically for this purpose. These flashlights were really handy for a variety of things during the creation of this animation. This shadow is an example of something that'll come into play later. It's something where it's three different pieces at different scales that, when aligned correctly, reveal an image. This technique of having an image represented in multiple pieces was something that I was initially inspired to do by a version of David Bowie's face. I suppose there's probably many things that have been inspired by David Bowie's face. In particular, though, there's a scene in The Labyrinth, which I saw many times years ago, where there is a statue that is a statue of part of David Bowie's face, and as the camera moves, it's revealed that that statue is actually three separate statues that, when viewed from exactly the right point in space, can be perceived as the whole. As the mouse travels around his world, he's collecting pieces and putting them into this mechanism. The mechanism, he discovers, is something that will eventually reveal a whole. Each piece of the puzzle has an engraving on it, which represents something that the mouse hopes that the mechanism might be. These illustrations were created by somebody that's very close to me, and it was really fun to be able to include them in this piece. Another major source of inspiration for some of the techniques used in this animation come from Lotte Reiniger. Lotte Reiniger was an incredible animation pioneer who created one of the very first full-length feature animations, and she did so creating silhouette animations on a light table made from paper and watercolor. Her work has incredible depth to it, just so, the intricacy of the shadows, the beauty of the backgrounds, and this is something that both myself and Emma here at Beyond the Bark have been deeply inspired by. Emma introduced me to Lotte Reiniger's work, and then we've been trying to recreate some of her techniques. And there are two different areas that the mouse visits in this film that are reminiscent of those techniques. One is a kitchen and one's an underground area. For the shadow scenes, I used a light table that was designed based upon Lottie Reiniger's original designs for her own light table. So it features multiple transparent layers and then a light source underneath. So it's possible to have, in this case you could see a printed paper background, and then multiple layers of paper objects, and then in the foreground is the puppet of the mouse. And then it makes it possible to move these different background layers at different speeds to create an illusion of parallax, that phenomenon where things that are closer appear to move more quickly, and things that are further away move more slowly. This is an early couple of production shots of a maze that was made to be reminiscent of an interior wall space that the mouse is traveling through. And primarily this is explored from the mouse's point of view. This was made to be modular so that it could be reconfigured for more than one visit, so that the mouse has a different path to follow each time. Rather than trying to deal with getting around the arches, I set up this entire maze and track upside down to make it much more easy to move everything. Also, I could remove sections one at a time to gain access to various different parts and make it easy to reach my hands in there. And here's an early motion test with the maze before the gears were animated. The gears visible through the mouse windows, again, were made to work and mesh easily. And then they were also repurposed for other things, such as the title card that says Tomcat Disposables. The other environment that the mouse visits is the Zoetrope. It goes here to, again, collect more pieces of the puzzle to try and complete the mechanism that it's building. A zoetrope is one of the earliest forms of animation. It's a wheel that has a series of images inside of it, and then slots through which it can be viewed. As with everything else that I created for this piece, I really wanted this to work in real life. I did tests in reality with the gears to make sure that they moved fluidly. This would make animating them much easier. And then I even wanted to see if I could make the zoetrope work when viewing it through the slots. And then it was a matter of each time that I moved the puppet to take a picture, I was also moving the zoetrope so that it would be continually moving in the background of all the shots that it was in. And this kind of persistence of motion, there always being something moving in the background, something carrying the mouse along towards the outcome of the film, is part of what helps to create that sense of momentum. And I won't say what the outcome ultimately is because I don't want to spoil anything. I'd encourage you to go and see the film if you haven't already. But those little touches of always having something in motion that's outside of the mouse itself were really important to this piece. Thank you for taking a look at this. If you like what you saw, we do post occasionally here on this channel. This is more of a digital portfolio for our company, but we will share things here time to time. Very little of it is like this. I haven't been in front of the camera for quite some time. We're generally behind the camera, so to speak, creating animations. But we do occasionally post animations here. We have an animation that's a bit longer. It's about a 10-minute piece that we've been entering into film festivals. Once we're done with the last festival, we will be posting that here. The timeline of that is indeterminate, but if it's something that is of interest to you, feel free to subscribe and hit the notification button, and you'll be notified once we've released our next film. Thank you very much for taking a look today.